Hello everyone, it's me, your average bonehead, Jay, and welcome back to Character Skeleton. And yes, you did read that title correctly. I'm actually going to be talking about a character from My Hero Academia. Okay, I'm gonna be real with you, Chief. I fell off of this anime way back at the beginning of Season 4. Yeah, despite this being the first anime I ever saw that wasn't directly connected to a video game franchise, I really wasn't keeping up with it for the longest while. Though I will always have respect for it because it broadened my horizon to a lot of animes that I really love, and some that I loathe. But as for My Hero Academia itself, as I just said, I haven't really been keeping up with it as much as others. However, there is two things in this series that do keep me coming back to it from time to time. One of which being Sue, because look at her, she's adorable. And the other being the topic of today's video, my personal favorite character in all of My Hero Academia, the fresh pick hero, Minoru Mineta. My name's Mineta! Oh my god. That was weird. Oh well. Moving on. Who is Minoru Mineta? Mineta is student number 19 of Class 1A at UA High School, and is known as the fresh-picked hero Grape Juice, and his quirk is known as Pop-Off. This ability allows him to take the grapes from atop of his head and throw them around. Said grapes are super adhesive, and will stick to anything and anyone that isn't him. At face value, this quirk doesn't seem all too powerful, but thanks to Mineta's own craftiness, he managed to make this one of the most versatile quirks in the entire show. Since they'll stick to anything that isn't him, he can use them as grappling hooks, whips, or even mini trampolines that he can bounce off of at high speeds. These grapes also allow him to climb 90-degree angles at great speeds. But the main thing he can do with them is set them as traps, because, as I mentioned, the grapes are very adhesive. Not even powerhouses like All Might could break free of them. Which means if Neto were to stick one on your nose and mouth, well, that's a pretty scary thought, don't you think? And you should be worried of the fact that he could do that, due to the fact that he's pretty accurate, as seen here as he was able to throw them at a cracking whip while running towards it. And when I said he was crafty, I meant it. Mineta is actually the second smartest student in all of Class 1A, only being beaten out by Momo Yaoyorozu. This makes Mineta pretty egotistical, as he's another character who likes to boast a bit about how great he is compared to everyone else. Of course, you could easily argue that he puts this on as a front to compensate for the fact of how short he is, and how he's not conventionally attractive, even though I always question why he doesn't just use the fact that he looks adorable. His other personality trait is how timid he is. Mineta is a very cowardly character, as any time danger arises, Mineta is usually the first to start panicking and doing anything in his power to make sure that he doesn't have to be in the front lines of any form of danger. Though when the time comes and he's inspired by his fellow classmates, Mineta is more than willing to help them out and prove himself a hero. However, that's probably not why you know Mineta. No, you're more than likely to know Mineta because, well,
for a frog, you've got some pretty big boobs, Sue. Perfect floaties. I want girls to love me, so I can touch them.
Yeah, but I have a real bad feeling about this.
Two birds with one stone. I'm a genius. Atsui's unexpectedly soft movies!
Thanks, Kyoka.
Despicable.
Yes, Mineta's main role in My Hero Academia is to be the anime pervert. Yeah, that tired trope. Though, honestly, it's because of this is why I find him to be the funniest character in the show. Not so much for what he does, but for the immediate hilarious repercussions that it always brings onto him. To me, Mineta's comedy comes from the slapstick that always ensues whenever he does something. That, I do think it's pretty humorous to see someone with that character design say something that out of pocket. Oh, and for anyone saying that he's a complete sexual harasser and the R word, just remember, Mineta's grapes are completely inescapable until they disintegrate. If Mineta really wanted to take advantage of these girls, he would, which to me shows that he has a lot of restraint. My point is further proven in My Hero Wants Justice 2, where he's told if he becomes a villain, he can get all the women that he ever wanted, but Mineta states that he wants to earn the love and affection. That, and it's not like he doesn't respect the girls of his class, with some exceptions. He relatively keeps to himself and more or less just makes out-of-pocket comments. But he does see them as strong independent women and great and powerful heroes, even if they don't see him the same way. But we'll get to that eventually. On a side note, I'm only noticing this while editing, but What the hell? Why does Mineta look like Batmite? Now I'm just imagining him voiced by Paul Rubens and how that would make this a completely different show.
And of course, hire Ted McGinley.
Character development. Let's start off with his relationships for this one. Mineta has 3 main relationships that I want to bring up. The first one is his relationship with Izuku Midoriya. I actually really like the nice friendship these two have. While Midoriya doesn't hang out with Mineta all the time, most of the times we see Mineta, he's hanging out with Midoriya. As it turns out that Mineta looks up to Midoriya.
Aside from in a literal sense.
As seen in his battle with Midnight, where Mineta is inspired by what Midoriya told him in the past. And apparently it's implied that Mineta might have feelings for Midoriya, which would mean that he's a bi icon, and I will gladly accept that headcanon. He'll make a fine addition to my collection. Actually, it was a mistranslation. Oh, I get it. When it makes him look bad, that was the original intent. But when it's something that can make him look good, it was just a mistranslation. Alright, it's okay. I see how it is. Now we'll wait with you. A more notable relationship for Mineta is his friendship with Denki Kaminari. These two are basically brothers, as Kaminari himself is also a pervert. No doubts about it.
I can't believe there's not a single bikini. Foiled again.
Basically, these two are like Pinky and the Brain, if they were on the same mental wavelength, and if they wanted girls instead of to take over the world. And they weren't mice. So basically, they're nothing like Pinky and the Brain. So yeah, most of the time these two team up to perv out on the girls. Like the time they use reverse psychology so they can see them in bikinis, which backfired.
Don't just sit there. It's time to come sweat with us.
No, wait, not cool! This wasn't the plan!
Or the one time their plans actually worked, where they were able to successfully trick the girls into wearing cheerleader outfits during the sports festival. Momo, you're the smartest person in the class. And Kyoka, you know these two are idiots who would try to pull a stunt like this. How did you two fall for this? Now, a lot of fans don't actually like this friendship due to the fact that they believe that Kaminari is not actually perverted and just flirtatious, despite all the evidence to the contrary, but that doesn't matter. Now, I'm not gonna say that Kaminari in some places is actually worse than Mineta by not bringing up the fact that Mineta sees women as strong, independent people, while Kaminari didn't want to fight one solely because he didn't want to hurt her, because he thought she wasn't going to be as strong as him. And I'm not going to bring up the fact that Kaminari was upset that the girls weren't wearing revealing bikinis opposed to school swimsuits, while Mineta thought the girls were pretty just the way they were. And I'm not randomly out of nowhere going to bring up that despite the fact that Kyoka has seen Momo exposed more times than any other character, that fans for some reason are never mad at that and in fact ship the two. Despite the fact that that's never going to happen, I am happy to burst your bubble on that. But I'm never going to bring any of that up. But anyways, while I do really like Mineta and Kaminari's friendship, my only problem with it is that I kind of want more of it. Or at least more of them just hanging out and actually being friends. Not every time we see them do they have to be the lady killers. I do think it'd be more fun if we just got more times of them hanging out as bros. Come on, I need more unlikely brothers from another mother to add to my collection. And finally, the other notable relationship that Mineta has that I'll be mentioning is his friendship with Tsuyu Asui.
I told you to call me Sue.
Sue is basically the only girl in the class that fully tolerates Mineta, as she's constantly seen hanging around him. Granted, it's obvious she also doesn't like his comments, and she's more than willing to straighten him out every single time he steps out of line, but it does seem pretty clear that she can look past that part of Mineta and see the good person he is deep down. And I really, really, really like that. It is pretty obvious throughout the series that Mineta greatly values any friends that he has, as he's always seen either around them or just overall worried about them. And I really think that's good to developing his character. Now for his actual character moments. You know, I kind of find it funny that despite the fact that he doesn't get that many moments, I find Mineta to be a more consistent character than the Screaming Ashtray, B-tier Zuko, D-tier Pinkie Pie, What's-Her-Face, and Shitzo. The first of the major Mineta moments comes from the USJ arc, where in this arc there's a moment where Mineta, as well as Midoriya and Sue, are trapped on a boat surrounded by bad guys, where Mineta gives the most realistic reaction to this scenario, being that they're only a week into training at this point.
We just got out of junior high a little while ago! I didn't think I'd be facing death a few days after starting UA! I can't believe I'm gonna die without ever getting to touch Yairo through the bill!
And And aside from this moment being important to Mineta as it's where he gets his friendship with Midoriya and Tsu, it's also very important because this is the moment where the two of them inspire him. During the big action moment when they're trying to escape, Mineta, seeing how brave these two are, finally gets some bravery for himself and uses his grapes to end up capturing all the bad guys. It's pretty simple, but I think it's really effective, showing that he does have some bravery in there. His next big moment, and my personal favorite of his, is Mineta's battle against Midnight. For this final exam, the students, in pairs, had to battle against one of the UA teachers. That, or manage to escape through the exit. And Mineta, paired up with Hanta Zero, has to battle against Midnight. But with Midnight's quirk allowing her to put people to sleep, Zero is quickly taken out of the equation, and Mineta is forced to take her on all by himself. And as you could all probably clearly see by looking at her, and with the knowledge of Mineta's personality, you can assume this is probably going to be hard for him. In fact, everyone does. Yeah, no one, not even his fellow classmates, even believed that Mineta could actually win this battle. And that's why I love this scene so much, because the odds are so horrifically stacked against Mineta. But it's here where we get to see how observant he is, as he was actually able to figure out exactly what he needed to do to cause Midnight to follow him away from the exit, so he can lure her into a trap. After, of course, remembering that he was inspired by Midoriya. And using the skills I stated earlier, Mineta was able to get right past Midnight without breathing, by the way, and managed to pass the exam. And one detail I will forever love is how only one of the students actually has to pass the exit for both of them to pass, but Mineta still stopped and picked up Zero and dragged him over the finish line with him.
Thanks to me, we'll live to see boobs another day!
I love this kid. Another great Mineta moment is from the first movie, where at a certain point in it, our main characters are trapped in a room in a very tall tower, and the only way they can get out is if someone crosses the fence to the outer walls of the tower and climb up it to the maintenance room and open the door so they can progress. And the only one of them that can do that is... Naturally, he's terrified of the idea of climbing the wall of a very, very, very tall tower, which is a completely justified fear. But after some special persuasion, Mineta goes out and faces his fears, helping them all progress. And detail I absolutely love is that they kind of promise Mineta that he'd get a harem for doing this, but all he gets really is a single compliment for doing a good job, and that's more than enough for him. And I like to interpret it as Mineta just yearning for some form of praise, some form of validation that he really does belong to be a hero. I not only find that to be very interesting, but very sweet as well. Oh, and I also do love how he helps to defend his friends throughout this movie.
I won't let you hurt my leg!
Alright, now the next one of Mineta is, that's it. Yeah, unlike Lola from the last episode, Mineta may be classified as a main character, but he's a side character. A side character that doesn't get much of any screen time, which, honestly, compared to the other students of Class 1A, he got the deluxe treatment. Yeah, now it's time to start complaining. This all leads into not only my biggest flaw of Mineta, but the reason why I kinda stopped watching My Hero Academia as a whole. This series kind of refuses character development. Now, it's not like there's absolutely no development with the characters throughout it. The series does like to introduce new characters for each major arc, and we usually get to follow them in their journeys. But here's the problem. Those are new characters that will follow for that arc, and then they're gone. They are no longer important after that. Meanwhile, the 19 remaining characters that are labeled as main characters, along with Midoriya, are almost never focused on. What's the point of having them be the main characters if they're not the main characters? Why does the series feel the need to constantly introduce new characters to hog the spotlight, leaving its mains in the dust? I like to call this the hit era problem, but even then with the hit era, where it constantly introduced new engines every season, it at least still tried to develop its main characters. It did it very poorly, but it still at least tried. My Hero Academia doesn't make really any attempts. Like, what do you know about this guy? Anything? What do you know about her? Anything at all? Anything ringing a bell? What about him? Is there any major personality traits you can come up with? Exactly. And that's the problem. And this is a problem that plagues Mineta even more, because now with everything I've said about him, Mineta is more or less nowadays a plot device. And that's why, despite Mineta being my favorite character in this series, I
kind of hate him. Let me explain. On the micro level, Mineta is mainly just used nowadays as a punchline to lol pervert joke. On the macro level though, we get the ever infamous hot spring scene. God, I hate this scene, but not for the reasons why other people do. To explain my frustration with this scene, I have to explain it the same way any sane person would try to explain Rise of Skywalker's plot. Backwards. Midoriya has to save this little brat named Kota, and the only reason why he wants to do that is because he has a special connection to him. And the only reason why he has a special connection with him is because he knows about his backstory of hating heroes. And the only reason why Midoriya knows about Kota's backstory of hating heroes is because one of Kota's guardians told him about it. And the only reason why one of them told Midoriya about it is because Midoriya brought him to her, because he was unconscious. And the only reason why Kota was unconscious was because he saw the girl's side of the hot springs. And the only reason why he was even on the wall in the first place was because he had to stop Mineta from climbing the wall. Yes, Mineta climbing the wall is a plot device. Like, come on, I know Mineta's a perv, but even this seems a bit much for him. But it had to happen so Midoriya can learn about Kota's backstory. Not that I care. Like, really? You couldn't have had him ask that night? I mean, the kid already assaulted Midoriya earlier, so you already had the perfect reason for why Midoriya was curious why he hated heroes. But no, we also have to have this one fan service scene that also makes Mineta look horrible, and make the fans hate him even more than they already do. Also, two little side things that also annoy me about the scene, but it's more or less problems I see with the fandom. One, Kota looked over on the other side of the wall, and no one's mad at him for doing that. But he's a kid, so it's completely okay that he did that. Based on what we see, clearly not. Also, he didn't have to turn around. Second little thing is, I saw people talking about how much they love seeing Midoriya's abs, and it was at that moment I realized this series cannot juggle its serious moments with its comedy at all. Moving on from this godforsaken scene in this godforsaken arc with this godforsaken brat. Now, if you're like me, you probably think the biggest flaw with Mineta is that the series just doesn't know what it wants to do with him anymore. So, what would I do with him? Well, with the improvements Mineta's been having throughout the series, there's one thing I think they should do that could really be a perfect way to wrap up his arc. Give him a girlfriend. Could be a new character, could be an old character. Just finally give him a partner. Like, for an example, let's just choose a random girl, her. Okay, so Mineta and this girl are already friends, and they work together for a bit, and after a big moment, the girl realizes that there's more to Mineta than who he is at face value. So she starts hanging out with him even more. And finally, Mineta starts taking notice to this and starts appreciating that someone, not just the girl, but anyone in general, actually appreciates the person he is. And eventually, the two of them can get together. It doesn't even have to be on screen. It'd just be a nice, sweet thing to finally happen for Mineta. And then after that, he no longer really is a pervert ever again. Because honestly, one of my favorite headcanons for Mineta is that he becomes one of the most loyal boyfriends ever and is always doing everything in his power to make sure his girlfriend is always happy and feels like a queen. It's just something I think would be honestly kind of hilarious for Mineta, considering how he is prior to having a girlfriend. In a way, it could be like Moroku from Inuyasha, where he was a perv throughout the entire series until he ended up with Sango. And while he didn't completely lose his old ways, they were always only directed at Sango. But on top of that, he was extremely loyal and did everything in his power to make Sango happy. Do something like that with Mineta, and honestly, I think his arc would be perfectly complete. It'd be a good way to send him off as a character. But one can dream. Okay, so before I get to my final thoughts, you probably realize that I brought up the fans quite a few times during this video. And that just leads me to a little side tangent I need to bring up when talking about Mineta. You see, Mineta is not just mistreated in the show, he is horrifically despised by majority of the fans. And when I say despised, I mean you cannot like him. Now, don't get me wrong, it is completely valid to not like Mineta. That is 100% A-okay. Heck, I completely understand why some people wouldn't like him. And I've even seen some people who don't like him make some fanfictions where they try to actually work with the character and see if they can make him a better person. Granted, most of the time it does lead to either A, they have the characters beat the ever-living Christ out of him because that won't lead to any resentment in the future, or B, they just make him conventionally attractive and blends in with the crowd because that doesn't say anything about your standards, or C, both. But honestly, those
or the Mineta gets expelled and replaced by Shitso, or even the Mineta death fanfics. They're awful, but I can ignore them. I can completely just live my life blissfully unaware of their existence or how many of hundreds of thousands of those exist. What I cannot live with and refuse to tolerate is how Mineta fans get treated by liking him. When I said that you are not allowed to like him, according to this fandom, you are committing a sin if you find him even remotely entertaining. I have seen so many Mineta fans be brutally chased out of this fandom just because they found him mildly entertaining. Not even their favorite character, just entertaining enough. The whole reason why Mineta became my favorite character was because of the amount of hatred I saw, and I thought he needs more love. Yeah, Sue was my favorite prior. But you wanna know how bad the hatred gets? Now, unfortunately, the victim of this thread deleted their account, so I cannot find it, but a while ago on Tumblr, yes, someone just decided they were going to draw Mineta. You know, simple drawing of Mineta, just a cute little drawing of him. And then this mentally unhinged person came up into the comments saying that they feel completely disgusted and uncomfortable by this person drawing Mineta because they don't like Mineta. Which, of course, I'm always questioning, then what are you doing in the tag? But that's besides the point. What this hater did was go deep down into the posts made on this person's account and figured out that they did not like things like maggots or just gore in general, and then sent a bunch of pictures of it into the comments section of the Mineta post, condescendingly asking them if this makes you feel uncomfortable. And that is disgusting. If you are someone who does that, or even for a millisecond thinks that's okay, get out. I cannot believe that that even has to be said, that you should not do that. But yeah, this is how Mineta haters acted for a long time, and every single time it looks like it dies down a bit, then someone else decides they have to be completely unhinged and harass someone just because they liked the perverted grape, who isn't even real. Allow me to explain how this whole debacle should go using something more personal. Ahem. I hate Nagatoro. I do not like it, and I think the relationship presented in it is fairly toxic. I think the main male character needs to grow a pair and should have slapped the mixed shit out of Nagatoro the millisecond she started making him feel uncomfortable for no reason. And I absolutely despise Nagatoro as a character and thinks that she deserves absolutely no sympathy from me or anyone due to the way she chooses to act completely unprovoked. But you see, here's the thing. Whether right or wrong, Nagatoro fans aren't going to change my mind. But now here's the more important thing. Whether I'm right or wrong, I'm not going to try and change the minds of Nagatoro fans, because that wouldn't be fair. Who am I to tell them what fictional thing they can or cannot like? If anything, I'm happy at the fact that they can find enjoyment out of something that I don't like and I'm even kind of uncomfortable with. But that's not something that concerns me. It's not something I'm gonna lay awake worrying about. It's not something I have a right to worry about. Because at the end of the day, it's fiction. They can like whatever they want. Hell, with Steven Universe, I can say I like Pink Diamond, and at most people are gonna say that they don't. But with My Hero Academia fans, when it comes to Mineta, if you say you like him, be prepared for a lot of people telling you that you are horrible. And that's where my problem lies. They don't have the right to tell you that, but they believe they do. Now, I can't stress enough that not all haters are like this. Like I said before, you don't have to like the character, but you shouldn't harass and berate someone just because they do. But bottom line, considering other characters in this series that are beloved by the fandom, and then you turn around and look at how people who just like Mineta are treated, I don't know. That seems pretty hypocritical if you ask me. Final thoughts. I think it's okay for me to say that I believe Mineta was dealt a very bad hand, in both the series and by the fandom. But I don't want to get any more with the fandom anymore. But in the series, it just feels like he was never given the opportunity to show his true potential, because every time he does have a bit of development, it's always undermined by the series wanting to tell more quote-unquote jokes. And it feels like there's still more they can clearly do with him. I still believe giving him a girlfriend would be the perfect way to conclude his arc. But despite all my complaints, Mineta is still my favorite for a reason. While it's never really that much in the forefront, I still love Mineta's arc throughout this series, and I love watching him just grow and become stronger, even if it's not physically. Some of my favorite moments in this series are just the ones where we see Mineta being scared, or just wanting girls to love him, but then willing to overcome all of those problems the millisecond his friends are in danger. And it just goes to show that honestly, he 100% earned his spot in the hero course. Do I wish more is done with him? Obviously. But for what they've done with Mineta now, I really love this little guy. And I love that he's learning to love himself and figure out just exactly who he wants to be, to the point where I can't help but laugh. For a show that has no idea what it wants to be, it's kind of ironic that its most hated character is the one who has the best idea of what he wants to be when he grows up.
Being a hero doesn't make you cool. People become heroes because they're cool.
And that's the character skeleton of Minoru Mineta.
I wanna love you like I love you should. You're fine, so kind. I'm gonna tell the world that they're mine. I shoot my nails and you twiddle my thumb. I'm really nervous, but it sure is fun. Come on, baby, you're driving me crazy. Goodness and gracious, great balls of fire.